provides a platform for a deeper understanding of issues affecting men in the Cayman Islands. Join us as we explore the low enrollment of men and boys in college classrooms, the absence of men in the church, and the absence of fathers in the home. Join the conversation as we help men find their place in the modern world. Through engaging interviews with experts and members of the community, we provide a clear picture of what healthy masculinity looks like as an example for boys and girls. Our mission is to provide a voice for men to help them navigate the challenges that they face and provide hope for a brighter future. So tune in and join the conversation on The Wrecking Trade. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of men and boys in the Cayman Islands. Welcome to The Wrecking Trade. I'm your host, Robert Lynch. Whether you're listening to us on Flashpoint Media or watching us on YouTube, a big welcome. This is the show where we talk about masculinity, male accountability, and responsibility. But before we jump into today's discussion, which is going to be an awesome one, do me a solid. Hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and let's aim for 5,000 subscribers. And if this content resonates with you, give that like button some love. It's not just a thumbs up, it is how we tell YouTube that the things that we talk about here matters. And with that, let's jump right into today's show with two awesome guests, and I'll just let my guests introduce themselves. We usually start off with 5 easy questions, and let's just start off with your names.
Okay, so I'm Sandy Stewart.
Sandy Stewart.
I'm Anthony Stewart.
Anthony Stewart. Same last name? Any relationship? What's your relationship status?
Married.
Married to each other.
To each other.
There we go. So that takes over your name, your relationship status, and what do you do for work?
Oh, I'm a radiographer.
You're a radiographer. What does that mean? You run the radio station?
No, actually, well, we deal with X-rays. Yeah, X-rays, ultrasound, CT scan, that line of work.
Gotcha. I'm imagining some relationship or some connection to Janine, that sounds like, or PA or production assistant. There we go. Production coordinator. And you, sir, what do you do for work?
I'm a press operator.
Press operator.
Yes,
Press operator. What is that?
Newspapers, print anything on paper, books, magazines, just about anything that has to do with your publications.
Nice. Okay, so highest education level completed?
University.
University, so that's a PhD, master's, bachelor's, associates.
No,
You just went to
degree
classes?
level.
To finish my degree.
To finish your degree. Okay, no problem. All right. So tonight we're talking about raising boys. And so from that, I mean, Janine has told me that you have kids. How many kids do you have?
3 lovely ones too.
3 lovely ones together. All right. And how many of those are boys? How many of those are girls? What's the configuration?
There are 2 boys.
2 boys.
The eldest is 17.
Uh-huh.
The second boy, special needs, and he is 16.
Okay.
And the girl is 11.
Girl is 11. She is the baby, so she gets to be protected by 2 big boys and I mean, have her daddy in her life. So she's a princess.
She gets to pretend she's the boss.
She gets to pretend that she's the boss, but that's because she has the protection of daddy and the support of 2 big brothers. And so with that, do you think there is any... What is the difference between raising boys now and raising boys, say, in your generation?
Well, that's interesting. In my generation, there were a lot less in offerings, so to speak. We had the basics. I grew up in Jamaica.
Yes.
And my story is a bit varied. I lost my dad through tragic means early. And I found that I spent a lot of time trying to learn what it was or how to be a man. So first it started with looking at the coolest people around, looking at uncles, looking at successful people, and trying to figure out what a man should be. And it was a time when we had a long bench. So unlike now with
what does the long bench mean?
The long bench would be a time when you'd have a lot of conversations. Men would gather and they would run boat and they would talk of their exploits. And so, you sit there and try to figure out, is that what makes you a man? And in a lot of ways, after a lot of mistakes, a lot of trying to, fit in, you recognize that this isn't some of the things that you're being presented with. it's not going to work. And fortunately, I had a mom who had a smart way of keeping the memory of our father alive, and she found a way to have us recognize that there's a standard, there's a principle, and it kept us focused on the things that were important. So, a family of 4 boys, and one of my brothers, the most successful of us, he's actually the Jamaica Hockey Federation president.
Okay.
Right. Big up Fabian Stewart. Right. I'd call him a stepbrother. All grew up in the same house. He is a engineer, well, not necessarily engineer, a mechanic, Patrick. And I followed him. I followed the Fabian, basically. And, we all tried to matriculate. But let's just cut that story just for the time being.
No problem.
Right?
I like that you said that, and it's interesting that you said that despite the fact that you lost your father, your mother still worked to keep his memory alive and essentially keep him in front of you, even though he wasn't around.
Yeah, she did that.
All right, awesome. I'm going to dig into that a little bit later, but let me see if I can understand your makeup. Did you grow up with your father? Did you grow up with your mother and father? What was your situation?
Actually, I grew up with my aunts. My dad would visit because he was in Kingston. I was in Clarendon, so whenever he could, he would visit, and using those times, they would use those times to really drive the fear of a father. Your father is coming, so you better do so and so, that kind of.
So your mother and father were still together, he just had to work in Kingston? Or
no, actually my mom and dad were separated, but I was living with my father's side of relatives. Right, so yeah. But
I guess what I'm trying to understand is they even though they weren't together, you weren't with him, but his presence was a constant in your life.
Yes. And as a child, I always, strive to live up to his expectations. Yeah.
Okay. So you had your dad in front of you through your mother, and you had your dad in front of you through your aunt, but both of you were trying to live up to the man that they put forward that he was.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And then what did that mean for you coming up, and what I'm going to get back to is, how does that image translate into your relationship? Who's your template? Who's the template for the ideal man for you that kept you to be where you are, and then that helped you to go, I see him, I'm going to get married to him. That's where I'm coming to.
It's interesting. As I said, there were several mistakes along the way. Following trends, following friends, trying to find a place in the world. But it wasn't until I got saved when I can truly accredit my development to the source, which is God Almighty. You see, there are colorful aspects that will remain, just colorful. But getting saved and starting to see role models in men of God, you started to see families. Almost, it's not for the first time, but in the church, you're beginning to see a father take his family. You're beginning to see men in a leadership role, and successful men who in other circumstances you would not have rubbed shoulders with, to recognize that they were still human people, and they would sort, but we call this word I'm searching for in my mind, when you have somebody to mentor you, right? And I started to recognize that I can be better. I really can be better than what I am, or what the culture would say I should be. And as a result of that, getting immersed in the work of the kingdom of God, getting immersed in community work, social work in other areas, and trying and learning, and I'd say the church taught a whole lot. This is the church of Firstborn in Jamaica, Grace Gospel Hall.
Okay.
They really had a strong youth program, and through that program, I had a lot of leadership exposure, and with that, there's so much more to say, But I'll let my wife take her stand now.
So what was that template for you for what a man looked like? So when you saw him, you matched it and said, "This is what I want."
So I was surrounded by pure females growing up, and occasionally I'd have my uncles and so pop in, but whenever my dad came, there was just something that spoke to the inner part of me, because he would validate, he would let me know. He was like a source of strength, so to speak. It was different from what I was used to with the females, and I'd always keep that, keep that, ponder over that. When I became a teenager and so forth, and then guys start getting interested and I would compare them, so to speak,
To daddy.
Right, to daddy. Like, if the standard I held in my child's mind, I would compare them to that, and if they didn't meet those expectations, then I would, kind of push them back a little. I wouldn't even entertain them. Yes, when it came to my husband, actually, that we have a saying in Jamaica.
I like the sound of that. Say it again. I love it.
We have a saying in Jamaica that girls marry their fathers. I believe that's true, because there was so much of my father that I saw in him when we were dating. I was like, this must be the one. Yeah. Yeah. That was very influential in my decision.
So do you think dads are important?
Oh yes, very, very important. I wish I had more of him growing up. If he was steady, I think it would have been more impactful in my life. But you're grateful for what you had, just the same.
Listen,
Got you.
Sir Roy.
Yes.
Her dad. And I put Sir, because gentleman. He was the first man that I had to step back in my confidence, step back and examine my confidence before making the step forward. Because when I, went for a visit, and he recognized that she was behaving a little peculiar. This is a young lady that would go to school, go to church, and go to school and go to church some more. And then all of a sudden she was having conversations and giggling at just a little bit, more than he's used to. So I was invited home, and I wouldn't say pleasantly surprised. I was shocked to see a trestle table placed under a mango tree. And he's on one side along with his wife, and I'm sitting on the other side in a full-on interview. Why my daughter, sir?
Yes.
So it was his approach, was commendable.
Yeah. So even though he wasn't there as much as you'd like on the day-to-day, he still played an active role in your mate selection.
Yes, and was very protective. Those were some of the attributes that made
but
me.
By that time, she had started. She was in residence with her mom and dad.
Yeah, at that point when I met him.
Right.
Yes.
you know. But even though he wasn't there permanently as a child, you know, he still played the role of, you know, the ideal dad, so to speak.
And that's what I'm coming around to, in that whatever the situation, whatever the foundation was, right here, because you're married to the man that he vetted. So
Yes.
whatever might have happened before, like you said, he was guiding the process, and that
Yes.
process has allowed you
Yes.
to find fulfillment.
Yes.
Because part of the challenge in 2023, and that's where we're going to come to in terms of raising boys, is that by and large you're hearing women say, hey, no good men are out there, all men are dogs, and a whole bunch of other things, right? And that leads to 68% of households are now led completely by
By
women.
women, yes.
And as I said to you before, I'm honestly thinking it's 90%. You know,
And you might be right, because while 68% of households are led completely by women, the other part of that challenge is many times you're also finding, even in two-parent households, you're finding men stepping back from the leadership, and in those
But
households,
in general,
it is the
it's-
woman that is actually in
it's
charge.
it's when you look at the influence.
Yes.
Right. You talk about mommy
Yes.
with the nurturing segment. Then you talk about basic school.
Yes.
I'm not even sure if it gets to a percent of men in basic schools, or
Yes.
you know, that preliminary stage of education. Then to
Primary.
other types of caregivers, it's generally grandma,
Yes.
right? You move on to the primary schools. I wouldn't be able to give you a comprehensive percentage, but it is on average
But
Predominantly.
at a
predominantly
glance,
Predominantly.
any glance,
ladies.
the educational system is
Yeah.
High school
dominated by
may be a
women.
little better, but it is
But
still,
still not.
way below par. And so what you find happening is that the primary influence is going to be female.
Yes.
Now, you know, the program says raising boys.
Yes.
And I would, you know, I don't want to be facetious, but you know, I'm looking at raising men, because the fact is, a child, a youth, you know, up to a particular age, you expect certain behaviors, but then when you're transitioning, you're looking for that transition into an individual that will be caregiver. I mean, not provider, protector,
And priest,
leader, priest,
Yeah.
prophet, king. You know, we recognize in society that we have a bunch of entitled babies, and you know, it's just unfortunate. You know,
So, and that's what we're coming to in terms of, is it unfortunate or is it by design? Because if you're saying by and large women are saying, hey, no men are out there, but 68% of households are led by women, and then in some of the other households women are still in charge, then that, and the education system as you have identified is predominantly led by women, that means most of the children, most of the men
The
that are
products.
coming out were formed, fashioned, trained by women. So if we're not enjoying the product that you are creating, then what is happening?
there's a challenge, right? Because because we can't absolve men of their roles,
Yes.
right? But what we have to face or come to terms with is what culture says or does to men, right? Now, you look at the education system,
Yes.
and I've worked in with school boards from the basic level, the special needs level, right, and the primary level, all age. One of the things that, as a board member, I complain about is the nature of educating a male child,
Yes.
right? And it's the pushback largely comes from the female members on the board, you know, and the argument is that the system is good, and I say, well, a good system produces good results, right? You know, you play you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes.
That's
you know,
right.
that's that analogy, and so you're looking at how boys learn, how boys interact, the things that help them to create the images that last in their minds, and it's not present. You know, trying to cut a long story short, you know, based on looking at where our education system came from, you know, or the design from Victorian era till now, and the changes that took place, by and large, in the, I wouldn't even say the 70s, but closer to 70s, 80s, you know. You stuck a boy in a classroom and you tell him, listen. And he sits there and you try to pour as much you can in him. Fortunately, our system is designed, that system is designed to pick out the best IQ. But then there are other types of intelligence. And unfortunately, we only recently started to pay attention to that. So we started to push the late bloomers and what we deemed a lesser IQ out of the mainstream. At the same time, when the education system started to channel more opportunities for girls, nothing wrong with that, but recognizing that they were trying to eliminate the single mother households or the baby mother syndrome.
Eliminate them or reinforce them?
No, they were trying to eliminate it. So you had the women's lib situation that produced an idea that women can do the same thing as men, right? And so you're trying to, some noble political mind, trying to create an environment to say, okay, listen, these are opportunities we're going to create for women. But at the same time, it started to marginalize the boys.
So that's what I'm wondering in terms of eliminate or create, because if you're looking at a situation where before households were led by men, right? And then you create a situation where eliminating the single mother household, but now we have more single mothers than at any time in history. So did we eliminate it? Because now we're saying a woman says, hey, I don't need a husband anymore. I don't, and we've gone as far as my kids don't need a father anymore because mommy can be both mommy and
mother and father.
You see, the thing about it is that we have adopted a culture. You know, we can remember, you know, the era when you had mother and father in the house, and you had respectable roles, right?
And not just roles, because you both identified it in that even though daddy wasn't there, mommy still held daddy in front of you as, or even auntie held daddy in front of you as, daddy is important.
That's the standard.
This is the standard.
You know?
But now we're in a different era.
And the creationist era is predominantly from North America, you know, and so one could say their welfare system fed that sort of a monster, but it trickled down. I can remember in the 90s when we started to, in Jamaica, when we opened up to the world. It was the World Wide Web at the time. It was cable.
Yes.
And when the cable industry boomed in the country, we saw that attitudes began to change because exposure to a brand new concept, right? And everybody, you used to say foreign mind. Everybody want have a foreign mind. No,
we want to enjoy these liberties.
Yes.
So
the freedom and independence of,
right. And then from bad policy through politicians.
Yes.
You know, and you know, some of my political colleagues will start to, I know he was there, no, because the fact is and this is where I draw the church into it. When we heard no bastard no day again, when we heard we brought in the 2012 somewhere along there, when we opened up to common law, you know, where was the push to entrench morality?
How to encourage.
How to encourage? Because if you're going to create policy that in its noble intent is to take care of disenfranchised young children, you know, that were left outside because of promiscuity by a husband, should you have also considered the issues as it relates to putting this buffer in to save them, that they will be provided for, but not taking account that now that you have tried to put the safety net in, the man that is creating the problem
can make more.
He can make more. He doesn't have to get responsible now. At least now the government take care of business.
And I guess by extension, the woman now, rather than going, I need to keep my legs closed, I can open them, I can pump out as many babies as I need to, and guess what? The government will take care of them because now they're okay. Because they don't need a daddy anymore because they have government daddy.
But the thing is, basically, I remember legislation introducing even abortions and so on. But when it came to the 2012 or so thereabout, when and you know, I may stand corrected with just the date, but the issue as it relates to common law, you know, because people got shocked up, we decided as a culture, it's time to accept it.
Yes.
You know, they're living together already, so let's accept it. And we're going to put provisions in place. As averse to asking the tough question, what is this going to do down the line? Should we now be encouraging our children to ensure that they follow the pattern that is designed for a strong family structure? You know, and that didn't happen. And again, this is where, you know, I look at the church and I say, you know, your voice in the argument as it relates to politics and cultural development is necessary, right? Because without that, you have a runaway politician who will just simply get excited and say, look, this is going to get me votes. Let me do it. Or, you know what? I feel strongly in this situation. But how many situations are the same? Fortunately, I had a person explain to me how the bastard thing came about, you know, and I lived through the era when they changed the issue of common law. And at that point in time, the country, or the Caribbean, was going through rapid transition. We were being getting extreme exposure to a culture that divorced itself from morality.
And has translated into an increase in divorce, and of course translated into an increase into boys growing up without fathers.
Exactly.
And of course the impact on our social structure, what that looks like. And we're going to talk about this a lot more, because as we're talking about these challenges and we're talking about these good intentions, because these intentions are good. You don't want someone to grow up feeling like, hey, they're a bastard because it wasn't their choice, it wasn't their doing. Mommy and daddy did something and now they're in a particular situation. You want to give them some kind of freedom. But the policies that we implement, if what that translates into is more freedom for mommy and daddy to create more bastards, then you haven't necessarily solved the problem. You just have more kids growing up without the joy and the benefit of having mommy and daddy in their lives.
This is okay.
And thinking that this is okay, which then translates into another generation of, well, I guess I can do that too.
It gets worse because now what you're finding is the age for, and again I can point to another poor issue when there was actually a debate as to lowering the age of consent. There was a time in the country, you know, and I know we're in the Cayman Islands, but we're looking at the policies that have created the failure.
Yes.
Right? And so there was this argument to try and lower the age of sexual consent to, I believe, 14 for girls. And I'm not so sure where it is for boys, because it's usually lower. Right? No, you ask yourself the question, you can't vote until you're 18. You can't literally pay taxes.
You can't get a driver's license.
You can't get a driver's license. You're not supposed to be consuming certain levels of alcohol and a whole range of things. You need parental consent to get married. Right? But you should have the freedom at such 14. A tender age.
My body, my choice.
To get... No...
Such a weighty responsibility.
What do you expect if you start to if you transition from playing with plastic swords to cutlass? You know, you're going to create major injury, right? So we skipped the realities of questioning the results,
The repercussions.
right? We try to, or our cultures try to ignore the voice of reason as it relates to maintaining a particular status, because you're going to be left behind. You're going to be seen as archaic. Come on, you're going to tell me it's the girl's body. What if she wants to? But then you're going to tell the taxpayer now, when the thing works out negatively, you have to foot the bill.
Yes.
We have
You have no choice.
filling up. We have prisons filling up, because now the young lady had to nurture a child with the absence of someone, with the absence of the understanding of how to groom such an individual. Who does she use to keep in that boy's mind the focus of being a man? How does she make him understand that he is supposed to become a man?
Yes.
He's going to be transitioned from a child. And when I deal with young men, and I said to them, think about this. Infant category age should be about a year or odd, something like that. Then you have the other toddler stage. You move from toddler stage to what we generally accept as being a child, and that goes up to 12 years old. And then after that 6 year, you only have 4 to become an adolescent, which is transitioning from being picnic, a child, to a man taking on responsibility. Now look at this unique thing. You had a generation where a 19-year-old was flying a heavy bomber, right? You had a driving a tank.
People storming D-Day,
storming
21, those young
Normandy,
ages.
right? You had a era where an 18-year-old would be holding down some serious responsibility.
Yes.
To a point now where we have 36-year-old men
Still boys.
not leaving home and saying, look, I can't work. When I go to work, it messes with my head. Having anxiety problems. Just give me a remote control and give me some PS5 games now, because the other one outdated. And you're asking,
What's changed?
Who provides the comfort for men to remain in this condition?
But then we have to ask ourselves, what has
How
changed
did it
in
get
that
here?
dynamic? Because what created the 19-year-olds who could storm Normandy, who could drive tanks, who could fight for the world in a world war, to men who can barely fight for themselves on a PS3 game? That and more we're going to explore right after this break. You're watching The Wrecking Trade. I'm Robert Lynch. You'll be back after this break.
My daddy went for a walk just the other day with my daddy right beside me. He said, son, what you wanna be when you grow up? I don't wanna be no policeman, cause crime is getting out of hand. No liar, no fireman. He said, what you wanna be then? Just like you. Me never ever see this, my mommy. Take care of me, you'd like you take care of me. That's who I wanna be, just like you, yeah. No, if you don't know them, daddy, thank God me know mine and him take care of me. Daddy, I'm a general. My boss are blank for my daddy. From the day my body's always been there for me. Through the ups and downs, you know you've always been around. So every day me show you love and not just Father's Day alone. Daddy, let me tell you straight, there's no greater man I want to emulate. I know that Mandela and Obama great, but in my life you are my head of state. Like you, always see you kiss my mommy, hug up and squeeze and caress my mommy. That's who I wanna be, just like you, yeah. No, if you don't know them, daddy, thank God me know mine and him take care of me. Daddy, I'm a general. Oh, genius, Spaniard, from me a little you know me turn a big man. You ever teach me right, you know you never lead me wrong. Teach me how to love, respect, and treat a good man. Mommy says she see you when she sees my face. She smiles, so there is no disgrace. Your love puts her in a happy place. So I gotta say, I wanna be like you. Treat my girl like you treat
Welcome
my
to The
mommy.
Wrecking Trade, the radio show that provides a platform for a deeper understanding of issues affecting men in the Cayman Islands. Join us as we explore the low enrollment of men and boys in college classrooms, the absence of men in the church, and the absence of fathers in the home. Join the conversation as we help men find their place in the modern world. Through engaging interviews with experts and members of the community, we provide a clear picture of what healthy masculinity looks like as an example for boys and girls. Our mission is to provide a voice for men, to help them navigate the challenges that they face and provide hope for a brighter future. So tune in and join the conversation on The Wrecking Trade. Together,
Welcome back
we can
to The
make a
Wrecking
difference
Trade.
in the lives of men and boys in the Cayman Islands.
Welcome back to The Wrecking Trade. I'm your host, Robert Lynch. We're having a great conversation. We're talking about raising boys. Before we went into the break, we talked about the men who went to World War III, who went to World War II,
Yes.
and how young they were, but yet they were able to march into this uncertainty. They were able to take on this great task. Yet we are in an era now where men a lot older seem to have challenges with even smaller tasks. And I guess the question on the floor is, what has changed? What caused those men to be able to, even at that young age, take on that great responsibility? And now when we have men who can't take on the responsibility of getting a job.
You see,
Yeah.
leadership.
Mm-hmm.
That is part and parcel of what is lacking. Leadership.
Yes.
If you don't see what leadership is supposed to be, if you cannot come to terms with how leadership operates, then you're going to experience what we have in this generation. Now, as much as we would like to think that using this scenario, there's a crashing sound from outside. It seems as if a window or a door is being broken. Mom or dad or mom alone wakes up. You ask a simple question: who would lead the charge to find out what's happening? If there is a drunk in the house, I'm sure he's going to be aroused from his sleep and shoved to the front of the line. Find out what's going down there, right? And while there are women who are, in some cases, equal to the task, the training that the classical man got informed him and encouraged him to take the lead. His wife will support him, but he's there to protect her. He's there to protect the children. He's here to provide security for them. Not a situation where maybe not. I don't even want to think of it. I wouldn't even speak it. But looking at, I once saw what do you call this? It's on the YouTube there, where they had a lion, the traditional lion, and they created a modern lion that had a ponytail, that had earring in his ears. And I don't care who you are, if you put those two lions together, there's a feeling of embarrassment that occurs. Now, people are trying to affirm all sorts of gender issues. Well, I stand in the kingdom of God, and I use the examples of what society has digressed to as averse to what it was before. And if you look at all the institutions that have been broken to create this new reality, you will realize that regardless of what our social justice warriors are trying to push forward, they have to continue to find more excuses, because obviously it's not working.
The outcomes are not looking like what they're supposed to be. You had something that went into those men who were storming Normandy that said, hey, I need to step up. I need to be something, because they had some kind of a template. And I'm imagining right now that that template has been removed since the 1960s to go, hey, when you say leadership, what do you mean? A woman can be just as good as leadership as a man, but we're saying no.
No.
Right?
No.
It's not the same.
It's not
That
the
was
same.
not the design. And we can say that because we're looking at the outcomes. Do we still have the same outcomes now that we did then? Do we still have men being able to take on great challenges? Or are those, because those men were regular men. Those men were, you threw a hat, you had the draft or whatever situation, you took some men, you threw them into war, and they went there and they did. No, you can scarcely find men who can stand up. Women are saying it, not just men. Women are saying, we can't find any good men.
I'm glad you keep that focus, because I'm sure somebody watching is up in arms. Is who him thinking be talking about women can, without paying attention to the fact that there's an overwhelming majority of women crying out because they are disenfranchised. Fine, you have a few women at the top of some particular ladders, and we applaud them. We congratulate them for the work they have put in. However, we also look at some of the policies they have made, and if you follow the success rate, or you follow the progress of the career, you start to question in the latter stages what's happening, because right now it's fancy. We like shiny things, and everybody wants to get onto the bandwagon. But now you're questioning a lot of the decisions that have been taken, and I know somebody might take me to task with this, but then I'd say, hey, Bud Light, so we have to take into consideration, not just, and I am doing this, not necessarily just picking on one bad CEO, but looking at the reality that our society has found itself in. I speak to children and to mine also, and I point out the culture clash that we're now faced with. And I say to them, okay, so you have been given more tools than I got back in my time. I wish I had somebody speaking to me half as much as we are speaking to you, young man, today, about positioning yourself. But let's take into consideration that we are in Christian society, we call it Western society, but now we start looking at the geopolitical landscape, and we're looking at people that have been traveling, the migration patterns, and you're looking at a child. Tom, give him a name. I'm sorry, I'm not good at Arabic names. But he's in Syria, and he has witnessed a civil war. He has walked past 4, 5, 6 unnumbered, untold, gruesome realities of death and destruction. He has had to flee with whoever he can hitch a ride with, because the family is destroyed. We don't know where mom or dad is, and if dad or mom is together, he's one of the lucky ones, right? He would have been aware of the ISIS threat and so forth. Stick a pin right there. You move over to the and it's not even move over to you look at the varying societies and young men moving out of some of these areas that now come into this society, get the opportunity for an education and grab it with both hands. But his culture is not of the kingdom culture. His culture is Islamic, it's Hindu, it's Buddhist. And regardless of the education, the culture is going to be a factor going forward. And so here are young people who, from a man of God's position, need to understand who Jehovah is, who need to understand what Christ has done for us, right? Who needs to understand how important it is to intercede and to teach. And you can run the whole gamut of what he needs to understand to maintain his culture. He's now competing with an individual with a culture, Japanese, who will work themselves to death, Chinese, African, and it's not to be derogatory, but this is to look at the cultures that are working their people to another level, and then having them transplanted into your space. Now, the Cayman Islands is not very different because there are several nationalities here, right? And so when the young man relinquishes his leadership role, why does he think that if a mosque start to be built next door, and shortly after there would be the need to have 5 o'clock prayers in the morning, and a loudspeaker rings out to say, hey, look, and you start complaining, hey, guess what, this guy is disturbing me. No, he's freedom of whatever. But you have relinquished your leadership role.
And that's an interesting perspective, because what it calls to mind is one of the things that's happening in the world right now is that Muslims are growing at a faster rate than Christians. They're converting persons at a faster rate than Christians. And part of that contention sits at many Muslims believe that the Christian man does not reflect the Christian man of the Bible, does not reflect what God has called men to be.
Before Muammar Gaddafi
They see
died,
them as weak.
They see them as weak. They see them as ineffective. They see them as feminine. And so actually out of alignment with the Bible, out of alignment with what they believe. And so they're not called to become Christian men. And so this is kind of where we're centering the conversation around how do we raise boys? Because for some reason, the world has infiltrated the church. And it's inviting even men in our church to look a little bit softer, to look like men who could not storm Normandy, who could not take on a tank, who could not drive a tank, but more so they capitulate. And many households, like you said, you went up to 90, I said 68, you went up to 90. Many households, even though you have 2 parents in there, the man is not actually the leader, because he hasn't been trained to be the leader. He hasn't been taught to be in charge. He hasn't been taught this is what leadership looks like.
Because you see, when we started to talk about, there's a unique way that you can play on words when you're putting out messaging. You're creating narrative. You know, we grew up in the era of 2 is better than too many, and look at what that did to our birth rate, right? My father was a part of a family of 14 that lived. He had 9.
He's a prolific multiplier.
Right. And we are now down to 3. And I don't want to talk about my brothers and sisters, right? But the Muslim, his duty is to reproduce.
Yes.
So Gaddafi said, look,
Raise up men for...
we don't even have to fire another shot, you know. in a particular year, just by volume of birth, we're going to be more.
So why are we as Christian men not taking up that call as well? Isn't
but
the call
society-
to multiply given to us as well? Be fruitful and multiply given to us as well?
Yes.
Then why are we shying away from that? I mean, because part of the challenge here is, as women,
Responsibility.
coming to that, as more and more women are told, okay, you need to go to school, get a degree, get a job, fulfill yourself in your career so that you can be equal to your husband. But what that translates to is later and later births, which means the window of successful conception becomes smaller and smaller. Because if you get married at 28 and then you need to get all you need to get in before 35 whatnot, then you can't compete with someone who's having children from their 18 19, right? Because we don't need to worry about. And so here's the thing. What is it that has put us in this position where the women need to go out and work as hard as men? Why are we doing that?
Bad policies and poor leadership.
Why are women not feeling like they will be protected, like they will be provided for, like they will have that leadership that is useful and fruitful and beneficial? What is causing them to the position where I need to take care of myself because I can't trust men?
Right. Well, one of the reasons is what they see in society. you know, what you deem weak men, you know, as they compare to what men of yesteryear used to look like and be like. When they compare them now, they see weak men. So that's one reason. And also, you know, you have groups like the feminist group and just the culture, a part of the culture that encourage women to, you know, be to speak out and to take on more roles that was previously quote unquote men's roles, you know, and as they do this and they achieve, you know, it empowers them to feel like, oh well, maybe they weren't so important after all. You know, maybe the men weren't so important after all, because we're doing
you
this
can do
and
what they did. If they were
getting,
just providers and you can provide to them.
And I can provide now, so what do I need them for, you know? And you have some women who actually go to school to study for certain jobs that was previously
for men,
just men's jobs. You understand me? For first time you wouldn't see a female on construction site and stuff like driving the large machines, and they're doing it now. So, you know.
No, but they've been forced to do it.
Have they been forced though?
Yes.
What's forced them?
Now, we go back to failed policies, right? You create a mother at 16 to her mother, who was probably 16 when she had. So mother is probably 30. She's not thinking of becoming a 30-year-old grandmother, but she is.
Yes.
She probably has several mouths to feed, and that's and I know sometimes we focus on the marginalized communities with this reality, but it is the reality that you have young women that started to become bearer of children to men who did not learn, to boys who did not learn to be men and to stand up to their responsibility. They were influenced by everything else but godly principles. So the DJs are telling them how much in a bundle, right? The politicians are saying some of the same and demonstrating some of the same. When you hear a politician talking about baby mother, you know it right. So then you start to realize that the church went into retreat because, and forgive me, pastors, you know, I don't mean, I'm not knocking at you.
Knock, man, knock.
But I'm saying that whereas the policies that developed men they're in the Bible, they're not hard to find. They're now absent.
Yes.
Right? And why are they absent? God says, come let us reason together. Right now we are reasoning together. You try to reason with some of our leaders and say how much o'clock a strike.
And that's why I say knock, because if you have a church that is not preaching Jesus, a Christian church that is leaving Jesus out of the message, then you're going to have a problem.
You don't cause offense.
So if you have a template that says, hey, this is what the leader has said, this is what the leader has put in his word for men to be.
Yes.
But then the persons who are now delivering that message are taking out those pages and saying, well, that may offend some people. Then what are we talking about?
You're going to run yourself into problems.
Yes.
Because now you should use the simple metric that you're seeing the reduction of men in attendance.
Yes.
Now, there was this big argument, the Bible is so patriarchal. Yeah. When the disciples preached, there were 3,000 that were added. Men. When Jesus was on the mount, there were X amount of men. He spoke to men. Men were there. And then you look at the message, the kingdom message that was presented. It was something that you could, one, reason, and two, apply. Right? So, you know, it reminds me of hearing messages, you ought to cry. Nothing is wrong with it. I go and get in trouble for that. But I don't business. Because the fact is, I'm still searching for the place where Jesus told me to go cry.
Yes.
Right? He said, he clearly told us, you must at all times pray. Right? The thing about it is, coming down to the meat of the matter, application. If what boys are being taught aren't applicable, you lose them.
There we go.
You lose them.
And that's what we're talking about today, how we're raising boys. And that translates to also is, which would do you think would be more effective? Bringing a woman to church, converting her, or bringing the man to church, converting
Easy
him?
answer.
It's funny you should say that because credit to this young man here.
Yeah.
That's something he has always said. If the church tries to reach men, 3/4 of the problem is solved, because if the man comes, the wife is coming,
whole family.
the children
Family
is
come.
and
Family
the
comes.
children comes. If the wife comes, the children may come, but then the man is
If you win the wife,
you know,
in most cases, you lose the family.
You lose the family. Yes.
Because the chances are the man will start frown. He is not engaged in this decision making. And rightly so. It's a between you and God decision. But for some strange reason, just like men's sports, women's sports, the arena is packed. It's a football match with males. And you have seen the last female basketball tournament, the last female World Cup, and the hurrah about pay and equal pay and so on. And there's much more that we can talk about. But there's a situation that we have to examine. Because when you have when you win the men, when you educate, and I don't want to use the word educate loosely. When the men receive the training they ought to, because the educator that they have been presenting has not worked, right? And you train them, deploy them, you're going to see the results, right? But I am convinced that the social justice warriors are hell-bent on sinking the ship if they can't win their nonsensical battle. And I know they're going to come. I don't business.
And this is the battle that we're up against in the church, in the world, to recognize what is the role of men and evaluating what is achieved by removing men. If we remove men, then we remove the strength of the society. If we remove men out of the church, then we attract more women to the church, by certainly, but then the church becomes a weaker force. The church becomes a weaker vessel. The church attracts less families. And so now what we have translating is more children who are growing up in these female-led households are finding their ways to prison, finding ways to crime, finding ways dropping out of school. And so you have more negative effects on society, which means our society gets weaker.
Naturally.
And so who would benefit from a design like that?
Satan.
Him alone. But in our church, we're still promoting this message where the only person who benefits, the winner, is the one that we were told that we were supposed to be resisting to begin with.
Yeah.
You know, when we're back in Jamaica, when the children were younger, for me, it seemed easy, so to speak. However, when we came to Cayman, there was a point where we weren't sure if my husband was going to come, right? Because of contract issues. And, you know, I said, Lord, we have this prayer we've always prayed that you should keep us together as a family, you know. And the Lord worked it out so that he could come. However, as the boys, more so than the girl, age, I would often say to my husband, I could not have done it if it were me alone. Because when they were boys, it seemed like I could handle it. But as they became teenagers, you know, and the change happened, I was like, oh my God, if the enemy had his way and my husband wasn't allowed to come, I could not raise them to be the men of valor that they ought to be. You know, they would certainly be lacking. I could not do this on my own. And you know, sometimes some women will say, I was mother and father to my children, and they turned out well. And you know, I remember somebody saying, ask the wives of these men and see how well in your mind you did a good job. But this woman now that is joined to him for years, she can rightly say if
whether the job was well done.
You know,
did you adequately prepare him to lead her, to
Right.
lead that household, to lead that family?
right? I know they would have been lacking something.
Yes.
I might not be able to say categorically what that something is,
And rightly
but
so,
I guess
because
that
you-
is what the male
father.
would instill. But I know they would be lacking something. I would not have been able to instill that much needed thing.
If you don't have
If
the
he
blue
wasn't-
marker in your
Look here.
toolkit, then that means you can color, but no blue will ever be in
and,
that.
and they know too. They know that they know. My eldest son, he knows. He'll work on the nurturing aspect of his mom. He'll play on it. You understand me? he'll play on it. Whereas with daddy now, you know, he knows. Okay, after
These are the boundaries.
these are
the
yeah.
rules.
No, you see, after the novelty of the infant child dressing up and walking with mommy and you know crying for mommy wears off, and he starts to transition, some earlier than others, into, but you know, who am I? Who am I? That is when he has to be directed to what he is supposed to be. Because every child goes through that challenge, finding themselves, right? And this is why God placed the church there to give this example of him being father, of your pastor, your leaders, men in the church standing up to show this type of example. Now, when you lose that, what you end up with, strong Sunday school, big Sunday
Yes,
school,
man.
youth fellowship, not so much. But then you get into adult church, it is a female convention, right? But the challenge to this is now to have some of our priestesses, some of our deaconesses, some of our chair female persons to acknowledge whether or not they are up to the job. Because a part of the problem I have seen, and I've been a part of church politics for a long time, is that persons like positions. You know, it bats well on a resume for some people, or it gives them something to do. I was always kind of concerned sometimes when I saw sisters leaving unsaved husbands to come to church, and I said, "Wait, you're running? Bring the man come, or give away for pray for. But you can't be here so much." No, you're going to get in trouble with this argument, because you are telling the person not to be in church. What kind of Christian you be? But let's reason. Let's apply spiritual knowledge to this thing. We need to do spiritual work to have to see particular results. Fine. But we also have to do physical work. Show me your scripture says, show me your. I'll show you my faith by showing you my work. Because the fact of the matter is, if your
Faith is your
your
works.
results
It's not matching up.
are negative, and it is constantly raising the negative barrier. How's now come church?
Children, as soon as
Pick
they have
now
the right
come,
to choose, them not
They're
them
not
not
coming
coming.
to-
You one and your big hat in church,
not
right?
helping anybody.
right? And then you know,
Because I imagine that you can't also be happy. You can't also be satisfied in church. You can't also be fulfilled and to be doing your purpose on mission if
Exactly.
your house is not in order.
Right.
exactly
So what are we doing? Are we just putting on a show
it
in the big hat?
in the big hat. And the thing is, you have to use this sort of language and create the picture because it looks good. The fellowship all full.
Yes.
Right?
Against the
And
church
there's
was
a
full today.
whole heap on praise and worship.
Nice.
But
The
then,
singers were all out.
then the counseling department is also overbooked, or somebody is not necessarily telling the truth because the happiness is not there. So we need to do some serious, not just introspection, but reform to ensure that we can model what Christ said was supposed to be there, and then start doing the work. Because guess what? Where men are, you don't have to look two times. The women
Women going
and
to be
children
there.
are going to be there, right? But so that is one of the
So even if you're just purely looking at numbers, then you want to get more people in church, it would be more effective
To
to
get
minister
the
to the men
males.
because men will bring with them.
The whole family.
While if you minister to the women, you've ripped that woman out of her family and left the family on their own.
and it continues throughout the community because it now becomes a community issue. The women are in church, the men are at the bar. They're having a reasoning session and they're being influenced by Mr. Ray and his nephew, right? And when they're done having that consultation, God bless what is coming home because a spirit is coming home. But you have to be careful which one. So we have to begin to recognize we need to affirm men. We need to build men. We need to stop this nonsense of trying to create an illusion of what equality is supposed to be. We need to recognize that you build your society based on principles. You cannot build without principle. And if in the natural world you can't build without principle, you cannot do it in the spiritual world because it all came from spirit.
But how do you build?
And this is what we want to zero in on because here it is, and you've identified, you have you as a woman trying to build a man but failing because you don't know what you're lacking.
Right. How do you build if you lack that which is necessary, the tools necessary to build?
Excellent.
You
So
know.
then the question is, why are we choosing to do that? Why are we choosing, why are women choosing to go, I know better than the man, so I'm going to leave him and I'm going to go raise the boys on my own?
Culture.
And when are we going to stop doing that? Because here it is. We're looking at the landscape and we're seeing the imported culture telling us, hey, women can be independent, women can go to do the jobs, women can go and do all of these things. And we're seeing the impact on our family structure. We're seeing more and more households being led by women, and we're seeing the fatherless group and the crime lords and all of these things. The men in prison are growing. Prisons are overcrowded, right? So as you said, these are the results that we're having. So when do we wake up and go, hey, we've been trying this experiment since the 60s, the 70s, and it's not quite working.
The narrative needs to change.
The victims are the children, and then the children become men and women, and then
create more
Children's
victims.
children.
they now create more victims. When do we stop and go, hey, you know what worked? What's worked for you? What I heard both of you unanimously say is that even though daddy had to go out and work, mommy kept him in front of me. Mommy said, hey, auntie said, this is daddy. Look at daddy. Right?
No.
And so even when you said, when you wanted to come and talk to her, you had to go and look at daddy.
Now, let me use, I'm going to use me as an example. I know I am, but for the grace of God, right? But for the grace of God, I put it out there because there might be several people who know my business, right? There goes I, and I can, I could flash the gunman, the what you call this, the gigolo and so on, could have been all of that until Christ got a hold of me, right? And what I found, one day my brother said something to me, profound, when he said to me, you know, you're successful, and I really respect that. At a time when we were on our face, I was on my face, right? That's a whole nother story. Living in my mother's house with my wife on my face. And looking at my successful brother, probably I think was the CEO for Fima Wireless at the time, and saying, you know, you've been married longer than several people I know who are successful.
Yes.
Because I was looking at success as dollars, man.
Financial.
Right? Now, he said that, and it resonated because I felt him, and I know him know God, and I praying for him walk a little closer with God. But him have a issue with how some people, you know, embrace
church.
Christianity. So when he said it, it was a moment for me to realize that, you know, something is being done right. And I could look to the Lord and say, thank you. Because women have left men for less than that. You remember, you know, you have the novelty period where love a bust and everything fix up, and then it starts going wrong. Right? One party lose the job, you can't maintain the rent, the mortgage and other things, so you have to find somewhere to go. And fortunately, Mama said, come, no bother with the foolishness, no bother with the pride, you try and maintain a particular facade. Come. So we bungle up in a mama house and go and do a thing. In that low moment, God would have used my brother to show me, hey, you're not gone, you know. You're not drop out. And I started to embrace the word a little bit more deeper. And I remember I was listening to a message, and a particular minister, at the time it was T.D. Jakes, and he said, look here, in his life when he was going through a particular period, he had to believe, he had to recognize that this is not it. And then when I started looking at what God's word says about what my life is supposed to be, but I can't just leave it at that. You had a Pastor Bennett, right? You had a Pastor Robinson, a Pastor Lengy, people who fathers who would speak the word and then also talk to you about real life. So it was not just about thus saith the Lord and done, but apply thus saith the Lord now, right? And so when, you know, you had brethren who could have looked at you and said, look here, it's a season. And they tell you what they went through. You're looking at successful people now, you know, choosing to share with you a little bit. So the mentorship issue of the brethren support me, make me realize, look here, that sister with the multi-million-dollar house at the time, it was Caribbean Terrace, you know, Sister Simmons, big up, you know, up there. And she could tell you what life was. You realize that there is a transition period. How do you learn to transition if you're not in an environment that is teaching you how to be that man, to wait, teaching you how to wait, right? And so scriptures like they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. Yet it's spiritual, you know. But what kind of waiting you talk about when you look upon your wife I come in your mother's house? But you're going to have to wait.
So on that note, and I love that you went there, and this for both of you as we kind of wrap up. And the idea here is there are some boys, there are some men even who they didn't learn to be men. They're at their homes. They didn't transition. Speak a word into their lives right now to help them to find that courage, find that hope, find that spark that will help them to transition to become men? What would you leave with them?
Trust in the Lord.
And
I
if I may,
know I'm sound super spiritual.
no,
but
and I'm trying to use what you said earlier in that, yes, give us the spiritual, but you also said you also needed the practical.
you're right.
So go ahead.
And that's why I'm going to use that word and I'm going to expound that.
Yes.
I know I don't have no other time. I know some people laugh right now because they know me a long meter. But trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him and he will direct your path. Listen, God is very practical. If he says, seek me while I might be found, seek him. There is a way. You can't do it your way. You can't do it simply because somebody I tell you that's the way. You have got to apply what he said in his word. You're going to have to humble yourself. Acknowledge where you are first and foremost. Am I in a good place? Am I really in a good place? Is this where I am supposed to be? Is there hope for me? Guess what? I'm here to tell you there is hope. Coming from a family where my father was murdered when I was 9 years old. And I had to live in that house. We had to live in the house same way. Couldn't go nowhere. Right? Going through a period, falling from where you had relative ease in life to knowing what going into a bus meant to carry 30 people, carrying 120. And a whole range of that. But learning to humble yourself, then fortifying yourself. And the only way to fortify is to take hold of the word. The scripture says, how can a young man cleanse his ways? And there's so much more to that, because you have to recognize in and of your own power, it never happen. Because if I didn't apply the words of God, I would not have this beautiful woman beside me. And I want to say she's my best friend. So I have one bridge, I have to run go to and tell him my business. I can come to my wife and talk to her. But I ask God for wisdom before I do it. Right? Yeah.
Because that's important. That's very important, because sometimes the things that we place in front of women can either help them or hurt them.
Yeah.
If you are laying in bed, as you said, and you heard that knocking outside, and you lean over and tell your wife that you're afraid, then that may pose a challenge for her, because the man who's supposed to protect her is now afraid. So now she may draw fear. So I'm glad you said that the Lord gives you wisdom even as you share with her. What would you leave with the young man, with your son, as you are preparing your sons to be married to other women? Helping to prepare your son.
Well, I think in my son's case, they have a true role model that they can pattern. But for persons who don't have mother and father, real man, real woman in the home, it's a little challenging. But I believe you can find them in society, and something in you will tell you, when you see certain things in the male in society, you will know that that's an example that you should follow. I mean, when they're lacking. I think everybody, whether you're male or female, when a man is lacking something, and when a man has something to offer, that you would want as a male, So they're out there. You can find them, and I guess the best place to start is the church.
Find a group, find a mentorship, find some kind of program where you can connect to men.
Right. Yes. I think you have more of them in the church. I'm not saying they're all there, but you have more in the church than you have in society. The society is a little more at liberty, liberal, so to speak. Yes. So Yeah.
Thank you. And is there anything we offer an opportunity at this time now to share? Is there any? How can persons reach out to you? Do you have a business? Do you have something that you'd like? How can persons connect with you outside of this show?
Well, at this point in time, I worship at the First Assembly of God, Cayman, and I am a part of the Royal Rangers program there, right? And that predominantly, I would invite you to find a Bible-based, Bible-believing fellowship, and start the process there. Because what I appreciate about the kingdom of God is that God says, look, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask, and I'll give it liberally. So you start with the place where wisdom can be found.
In the presence of God.
In the presence of God.
Amen. Thank you both for sharing the time with us, and thank you for spending the time with us today. And the message here, whether you're a Bible-believing Christian, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a man of God, whether you have met Christ, whether you know him, whether you have a man in your life, clear message that you can take away from today is stop. Be still. Look at yourself. Are you where you want to be? And if that's not where you want to be, then start to chart a course to get to where you actually want to be. With that, this has been The Wrecking Trade. I'm your host, Robert Lynch. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll catch you in the next one.
We provide a clear